Okay, hello again. This is chapter 7, and the focus is going to be on procedures of endocrine, nutritional, and metabolic conditions. This will be a little bit longer than our previous video lecture, and we're going to talk about how you build these PCS codes, again, dealing with hospital-based procedures on the endocrine, nutritional, and metabolic systems. So let's have a look. Okay, so we're talking about procedures related to the endocrine, nutritional, metabolic, and immunity disorders. There were a few more than what we saw with blood and blood-forming organs. What you may want to do before you dive into everything else is to review Table 7.1. This table will talk about the root operations that are most likely to be used on the body parts within the endocrine system. So we have change, destruction, division, drainage, excision, extirpation, insertion, inspection, reattachment, release, removal, repair, reposition, resection, and revision, right? So again, focus on these common root operations. So you need to understand what the procedure is doing. What is the intent of it? It's, if you don't know what the term for the procedure is, look it up, and that will give you a drill down version of what is actually happening and what root operation you should use. Table 7.2 in your book talks about the body parts that are involved with the endocrine system. These are the glands, the pituitary, pineal, adrenal, carotid, all the different glands, endocrine glands, parathyroid, thyroid, they're all listed here. I don't need to really go through them. But these are the ones that you'll see in the table in the code books when you go to assign those codes. 7.3 is talking about the approaches. So be very careful about the difference between percutaneous and percutaneous endoscopic, right? It's the approach is how the surgeon accesses the site of the procedure, not the incision, right? So read the operative note or the procedure note very carefully. Table 7.4 is for devices, and we do have them in the endocrine system. They include drainage devices, monitoring devices, infusion devices, other devices, and of course, no devices. Many of these endocrine procedures do not involve a device, but when one's used, it's got to be captured in the code. If nothing is remaining in the body after the procedure, the value, of course, will be no device. Table 7.5 is a qualifier that may be used with procedures performed within the endocrine system. And these could be diagnostic, no qualifier, right? And then the most common procedures on the endocrine gland are the excision, right? So you're taking out a part of the, the endocrine gland, the resection, the removal of it, and the destruction. Biopsy procedures can be done either by an excision or a fine needle aspiration. So that could be an excision of tissue, drainage of fluids or gases. Laterality is important to identify the body parts, right? So you can read these procedure guidelines for B3.4.A to make sure you get the biopsies correct. Stereotactic radiosurgeon is using a gamma beam to destroy lesions on endocrine glands. And these places they do them are the pituitary, the pineal, adrenal, parathyroid, and thyroid. These are coded in the radiation therapy section. So it's a whole different table than what we've been using so far. And just a couple things to wrap up. The very most important thing in this chapter, and for that matter, all chapters in PCS coding, is to understand what the procedure is. Think about what the goal of the procedure is. Usually that'll help get you to the right root operation. I hope you found this helpful. Please reach out if you need any help. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you online. Bye now.